People like to say, have a good day, and it's a nice sentiment, but it's a fixed perspective that can put a lot of pressure on us. It's also really hard to define from person to person. What about instead if we ask ourselves, how can I have a better day? At work, at home, in life? That's what this show is all about. The Have a Better Day podcast comes to you from Boon, a personalized coaching platform that helps businesses everywhere to support the whole humans, which are their employees. We have our pulse on what employees are dealing with in today's workplace, and we want to share those insights with you. Welcome to the Have a Better Day podcast. Thanks everybody for being here today. There's been a lot of talk about offices and hybrid work, remote work. What is the optimal model? What is going to be the path moving forward? What are businesses going to be doing? Employee-employer leverage is shifting. What does that mean for the benefits landscape? There's a lot of questions about what's going on in the office today, and I feel lucky to be joined by Scott Fleszar today. So we got a great conversation for all of you, and looking forward to digging in. Thanks. Scott, thank you for being with us today on the pod.
I'm happy to be here. I've always had a lot of respect and admiration for Boon and everything that you're doing. I love the contributions you make in social media and on LinkedIn and how transparent you are, and really just you talking about important and relevant topics for business. So really excited to spend some time with you and excited for this topic.
Awesome. I appreciate you. And for the audience here, you got Scott Fleszar, who's most recently the CEO of SafeSend, which is a really cool technology, rapidly scaling business based out of Michigan that is a current Boon customer that we've had the opportunity to work with now for the last about year and a half or so. And I guess, Scott, you've had the opportunity to see both sides of the spectrum, from in-office leadership to advocating for hybrid and kind of seeing the benefits of both of those. I guess, can you just talk more about what kind of led you to reevaluate your views on the value of hybrid work and, I guess, remote life in a post-pandemic environment?
Yeah. Well, what an important topic! What a big topic, and very relevant, very timely. There's so many different new perspectives coming out around this. It seems like certain organizations are trying to come almost full circle from where they were before the pandemic. I don't know that I see that happening broadly, but yeah, this is the type of topic: how people work, where they work, how they collaborate, how they interact. That's so important. So, I think I should start first with my bias. My bias is, I like working in an office. I like being around people. I like spending time interacting in person. And I know there's others that feel differently. So I always come from that bias. And at SafeSend, our Ann Arbor office, our teams are in the office 3 days a week, 2 days working remotely. I would always go in 5 days a week, even on Fridays when sometimes there was no one else there but me. But that's just kind of my mindset. I like the process of getting up, going somewhere, kind of, fully immersing yourself, and then kind of being able to pull yourself out of that. So I guess to start with, my bias has always been to work in person.
And Scott, how much of that do you think is generational, based on what you've seen? Like, do you see it being like is this a boomer, Gen X? Hey, we're the leaders of the company, and generally speaking, we are the ones with that bias? Or do you feel like this cascades?
Yeah, no, I definitely think the older generations, I guess I'm going to put myself in the older generation camp. The older generations, I think, slant more towards working in the office. And it's really a good segue to the core of your question. What kind of brought me around to hybrid work and just the ability to interact with people wherever they're at? And that was really the pandemic. And so it was forced, essentially on me and on our organization. Yeah. Maybe at the time, we were really at a point where we were investing significantly to grow and scale the business. And we were going to do that in part with an office in Ann Arbor, and then not long after, we opened an office in Bengaluru, India, where our engineering team is. And being in the office and having kind of an office, the tangible nature of having an office, people going there was going to be a big part of our plan. So when COVID hit, I remember how naive I was, because we had just in January of 2020, we had said we're going to open an Ann Arbor office and we're going to really begin to grow and scale the business in large part by hiring people there. We opened the office in early March, which was the absolute worst possible time ever to open an office in March of 2020, because we put out a press release, we opened the office, and literally 2 days later, we closed it with the rest of the country. And I thought in my mind, 1 to 2 weeks, we'll be back, but no worries. And then, of course, it was much more protracted than that. And that's when I realized, and just from experience, that you can make remote work be very engaging and effective. And that's because really the technology tools, whether it's Zoom or Teams, the platforms to support virtual meetings are very good. There's intranet tools that allow for lots of cross-company communication and collaboration and input from every individual in the organization. And, that piece of it, and our effectiveness working completely remotely using cloud-based tools, that was one piece of it. And the other piece of it, which was we can hire now and not have the constraint of geography. So thinking about, there's talent out there that isn't in or around the Ann Arbor area or the Bengaluru area, and now we can tap into a much bigger talent pool. So, those things shifted my mindset, certainly from someone that had just expected that being in office was going to be a huge part of how we grew, to, the idea that virtual work can be very effective and you can grow and scale working virtually.
Yep. And I guess just for the audience, just roughly how many employees were we talking at SafeSend that you were scaling to between the U.S. and India?
Sure. When I first joined in Q4 of 2019, roughly 40 employees. We're about 180 employees today. And our staff in the U.S., roughly speaking, about half in and around the Ann Arbor area, the other half scattered around the country. And in Bengaluru, most are in and around our Bengaluru office, but then we have others too in other places throughout India that, are primarily working virtually.
And so what I'm hearing, a lot of those folks that are not in Ann Arbor, but are in the US, were a lot of those hires made like kind of after you guys made that decision of, okay, well, we're clearly going to be operating remotely here in this post-pandemic environment. Is that when those hires were primarily made?
Yeah, I would say our hiring, throughout the rest of 2020 and then into 21 and 22, we took on a mindset of we're going to hire talent where it's at. We want a very good talent. We want people that are going to help us grow and scale the business. And it's a nice to have if they're around one of our offices, but not required. So yes, our hiring mindset absolutely shifted at that point.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me. Like these, I mean, you hear about, okay, you obviously, and every business really to a certain extent was forced into this remote workplace. Like you didn't really have much of a choice. The in-office was completely shut down for a certain period of time. And, you see Amazon rolling back, and I actually had a LinkedIn post about this yesterday, but ordering their people back into the office as of January. And it's basically, it comes off as like a, either do it or get lost sort of approach, which I don't think that's going to be the last large business that starts bringing their people back full time. I think that's going to become a bigger and bigger common trend. I think, what I find so interesting is you have the Amazons of the world that obviously have like a hub and spoke model where they've got offices in every major metro, and wherever they've hired people, in theory, there's an Amazon office somewhere nearby, right? They're not making these people relocate to New York or DC or wherever. But a small business like SafeSend, when they've made the decision to hire remotely, even if they want to have this hybrid or in-office approach, how do you roll that back as a small business who has hired so many people all over the country where you don't necessarily have the same luxury of these multiple offices in all these different metros. I guess, how do you think about that hybrid model for that approach? And I think so many businesses are going through very similar things to what SafeSend is, where they've hired all these people all over the country. And it's like, oh, what do we do now?
Right. I think there was one nuance, actually, Alex, to our strategy, and that was with Ann Arbor. We did kind of decide that we were going to have salespeople as much as possible in the office there, and our marketing people.
Yeah.
And then we were more deliberate about virtual for other teams. And I think once on a team by team basis, once you decide to go with, virtual or, dispersed teams, you're right. It's going to be very hard to roll that back.
Yeah.
But I do think maybe on a team by team basis, based upon the needs of the team, how, they best work together, where the leader is, those kinds of things can shape those decisions. We've got a fantastic sales leader that is based here in Ann Arbor. So we have a lot of the sales team, most of the sales team in the office in Ann Arbor, and the sales team in particular, just thrives on, the momentum and the wins and having, we've got a bell on the wall that gets rung every time a sale gets closed. Those kinds of in-person interactions are really important. The sales leader comes in every day, walks around and gives a fist bump to everyone in the office, everyone in the office, not just everyone on the team. And it's not just a going through the motions fist bump. It is an actual, level of engagement that is important and really helps with that. But then with some other teams, we decided, with the talent we're looking for and maybe where the leader's at, we're going to go with a fully virtual approach. And, getting back to your question, I think it's very hard to kind of roll that back, especially, again, if you're a small organization. Amazon's got, leverage and they've got ways that they can, mitigate that, work around that. But, for smaller businesses, you've got to think about your strategy and think about, once you have a team of any size that's fully dispersed, provided you're happy with them, you're probably going to stick with that. So,
yeah. And I guess, so you've seen the remote model work as it has, and you guys clearly adapted to that and rapidly scaled your business. I guess now that people have started to come back into the office, you talked about the sales team and what that in-person camaraderie means. I guess talk to me more about like the cultural differences that you've seen since having people back in the office, at least on a hybrid basis versus remote. And I guess like, how do you weigh the pros and cons of all those things? Because I feel like at the end of the day, what remote is giving you is a lot of flexibility, and hybrid seems like the happy medium where you're still able to offer that flexibility, but you're still getting that in-person time that's so valuable. I guess, what has been your experience as the leader of a pretty sizable business?
Yeah. I mean, as CEO, I spent a lot of time ruminating on this, thinking about this, and just trying to develop the best strategy, the best approach for our business, for our culture, for our people. And I was always interested to hear what other businesses were doing. You mentioned the Amazon mandate. If you read the communication that was sent, to the employees, I do like the approach the CEO took with that communication. Started out from the get-go about, been with this organization for 27 years, never thought I'd be here this long. The reason I've been here this long is because of our great culture, and just laid the foundation that culture is so important to the success of their business. It's a competitive advantage. And this move, what's been positioned is it's about culture. It's about collaboration. It's about, how teams learn from each other. And Amazon thinks it's a competitive advantage to have people in the office, 5 days a week. For us thinking about culture, we have a great culture at SafeSend. We feel it's a competitive advantage for us for sure. And really, we focused on some important things to make sure that, all of our people, wherever they're at, are engaged and involved. And it's simple things, but I think if you overlook the simple things, you can stumble. But it's camera on culture. So when we have meetings, like, virtual meetings, we will have, everyone has their camera on, and that's important. It's a be here now philosophy. So not multitasking. You really need to conduct yourself in that meeting in the virtual environment as if you were in person.
Yeah.
It's the use of the intranet, and, making sure that, our team in Bengaluru, our team in Ann Arbor, our people that are virtual are all contributing. So we celebrate milestones on there. We celebrate, wins. We share in local customs and culture, and we try to make sure that everyone at SafeSend, just has a sense for the people in our business, and that's important. And I think, again, maybe simple, maybe not so simple. It's important to, whether you're on the if it's on the intranet or you're doing an all hands meeting, it's to use graphics, it's to use pictures, it's to use video, so that there's a rich media experience. And again, wherever you're at, you have a feeling that this organization, goes beyond a Zoom meeting. It's real people that interact, that are dedicated to our customers and dedicated to each other. And that's going to make us successful. And we're not robots. We are real people. And we try to share beyond just what's going on in the business, share personal things, share local customs and culture. And that all kind of weaves together to, it's a mosaic. It's you got in-office experiences, you got people that are mainly virtual. And, for all of our virtual teams, we make sure at least one time per year they come together, whether it's the Bengaluru office or the Ann Arbor office, for in-person time. And some teams it's more than that, but that's important. And those times shouldn't all be jam-packed with just business meeting after business meeting, but time for people to shoot the breeze, to get to know each other, to talk about things other than the business, and have real connectivity. So, those are some of the things, that we've done at SafeSend.
And I'm curious, I've heard from a lot of business owners, and, if you're not comfortable talking about this, totally understand. But I've talked to a lot of business owners where they've talked about bringing people back in the office from remote into a hybrid setting. And it's like, yeah, we just went from, 0 days to 2 days in the office, and you're met with friction. And it's like, how do you communicate through that friction and get to a point? It sounds like from the Amazon CEO, like you're talking about in that PR announcement, it's like, if you lay out the business case about why this makes sense for everybody, you should all want to be back in the office to a certain extent. I think it's one thing going from 0 to 100%, but I think finding that happy medium, I think we've heard in certain instances, employees actually welcome that because they were so tired of this fully digital environment. So I guess, what was your guys' experience with that? And I guess, what was that communication like in getting back into the office?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really about transparency and communication. And, for me, again, as CEO, just thinking about, let me step back and say, one of the narratives I've read online quite a bit from generally, employees, staff people that say, I just don't know why my company is forcing me to be in the office because there's nothing I can't do virtually that I do in the office. And I would say, true. I think in the truest sense, that might be the case for a lot of roles. But to me, what I want to battle against is a lack of engagement. That might be the most important thing, because when I think about what's important for the organization to grow and to thrive, and it's engaged employees. And I think if you are fully remote for a long period of time, you can just fall into a trap of I'm clocking in, I'm clocking out. I'm complacent. I might be even straying towards apathy. And to me, the importance of employee engagement, the importance of our culture, and really the importance of connective tissue across our organization. So those are the types of things that we would talk about as importance for at least our people around offices to be in the office. It's communication and collaboration. It's easier to do when you're in person. Not that it can't be done virtually, And that's going to help with our connective tissue, our cross-company collaboration.
Yeah.
We talk about our culture and how, our people are our most important asset by far. And we think, the identity that you have by, working with others in person, comes out. And then engagement. And the engagement you have with the business is enhanced when you're having water cooler conversations, when you're talking to other teams, people on other teams in person, and learning more about what's going on in other areas of the business. So all those things kind of combine. Just a clear communication about why we feel in-office time is important, and it's also important that if you're saying that as a leader, then you're going to have to also be doing that. So the leaders of these teams obviously needed to be in the office as well.
Yep.
And we were able to do that. So.
Yep. And no, it's interesting. I think it was Korn Ferry or one of those, either Korn Ferry or McKinsey came out with a study that was actually measuring like side by side of employee engagement for remote versus in-office versus hybrid. And hybrid was actually the highest engagement from whatever their sample size. I think it was like 5,000 employees or something like that, which is not surprising based on, what I see every day and what you're talking about.
Yeah. The hybrid model, I think, for employees that are fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of that because they're around an office, I think is the best of both worlds. And there was a time when I thought, you need to be in the office all the time, and I've moved on from that certainly. And I also, as CEO, I was also, really wanted to make sure I wasn't tone deaf on this topic because everyone has, their own, lives that they've got other priorities and competing demands with. And just because I like being in the office all the time, and that's kind of my preference, that's not going to be the same for everyone.
Yeah. And, I think just shifting topics a little bit, I think something that I actually posted about, and I think is an interesting dynamic that continues to shift in the workplace more broadly, is this idea of leverage. And I think throughout the pandemic, you heard a lot about the Great Resignation. There was quiet quitting. There was this idea that employees could basically do whatever they wanted and go to whatever company they wanted, and it was impossible to find talent anywhere. And so things like remote work and hybrid work and having ultimate flexibility and getting the most robust benefits for your people in every which way, whether it be, financial well-being or mental well-being or everything under the sun, you're getting it so that you can recruit and retain top talent. I think over the last, I would say June of 2022 is kind of the first time that we noticed it, where it was like, okay, interest rates are rising. There is a shift in what's being perceived in the market. And I mean, you haven't really seen real softening in the labor market until the last, 6 months or so. But now that you are starting to see that, it feels like there's a shift in tone of conversation around, okay, you're coming back into the office 5 days a week. What does that mean in your view from all of these benefits that were going gangbusters over the course of the pandemic, all of these other things like flexibility and, you name it, that were just going bananas over the life of the pandemic? What does that mean for that entire landscape today? I guess, how do you see that evolving as a business leader?
Yeah, I think it's fairly common that when you have big shifts in the way, or any kind of trends, in business, oftentimes the pendulum almost shifts too far one way. And I think perhaps with remote work, the pendulum shifted, maybe too far, where everything was remote first. And you did hear about these organizations, we'll never be back in the office, we're going to be fully remote all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how sustainable that is. And there's a variety of things I think about. It's, if your sample set or your base case is a team that's been together for a long time, that's been working together for a long time, sure, Can they go remote and be very effective, even for a long period of time? Absolutely. But in a growing dynamic business where you have people coming and going, you got people moving to different departments, different functions, you need to embrace new people into your culture. When those kinds of dynamics come into play, that's where I think, organizations are taking a look and saying, we need to be better at making sure we have, all of our people, kind of rowing in the same direction. And to me, this is where I think hybrid is kind of a happy medium where, there's a nod to technology tools are very effective, and there probably isn't, this is my opinion now, there isn't a need that you have to be in the office for 5 days.
Yeah.
But there's also real benefits, collaboration, employee engagement, culture, to having you in the office 2 to 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think now, because of the overall, I'll say, employment marketplace, I think you're right. I think employers now have more leverage. And one of the things I never feared this idea that because of the way that hiring was happening for technology companies where they were hiring people wherever they were at, I never feared losing people to that because I wanted SafeSend to have the best culture so that people wouldn't be thinking about leaving. And I think, at this point, there's going to be an interesting dynamic that's going to happen where I think companies like Amazon and any other company that decides to draw a hard line in the sand about 5 days a week, I think they are going to lose some people that have just, they might be in the area, but they've said, I don't need to be in the office 5 days. And I think that's a risk clearly that Amazon seems like they're prepared to take, and maybe some other organizations as well. So, but I think, engagement and collaboration are the big things. And I think what separates a good business from a great business, especially if you get to any size, is how well communication and collaboration across the company happens, and how well people are working together, and is everyone on the same page? Are they rowing in the same direction? And in-person time really helps with that.
Yeah. I'm curious from an onboarding perspective specifically, because you guys were hiring so many new people. I guess what have been some of the big differences that you've been able to find in that part of the business in particular? Because I know, just talking to people leaders and seeing the data, that's the number one time that somebody's going to turn over, is the first 6 months of working at a company. So what was that aspect for you guys in the remote environment? And I guess, have there been big changes that you've seen in being in person more frequently?
Yeah. This is actually an area that I've talked to some other CEOs about because, thinking about all the things that keep you up at night, that was one of them, which was, okay, we're hiring all these people that are, going to be fully virtual. They'll be to the office once or twice a year, but how do we, immerse them in the culture early on? So we did a few things that I feel were effective. One is, immediately, this isn't unique to us, but I think it's, again, just one of the things that you want to do. We would send them, kind of a welcome box, which would have swag in it. It would give them a sense for, the brand, and, they could wear a T-shirt, they had their mug, those types of things. So I think that was important to, to establish something tangible, with the new staff. And then I would meet, as CEO, I would meet every 2 weeks with new hires that had been, hired within that period of time. And I would make those meetings one meeting regardless of where the people were at. So sometimes there were people in the office with me in Ann Arbor, and then I'd have up on the wall a big video screen with everyone that was remote, and we'd go around the room and introduce, and then I'd go over our business, our priorities, how we focus on customers, how we help each other. And that was really my opportunity, first of all, to introduce myself to them, to welcome them into the organization, to talk about, we have our Ann Arbor office, our Bengaluru office, but we also embrace our team members that are fully virtual, and you will be coming to the office, with your teams at some regular interval. And that was an important opportunity for me to have to share with them a bit about the culture and kind of what we stand for as an organization. And then there were times where it was important to bring these people into the office relatively soon, but we learned a lesson that you don't want to do it week one and maybe not even week two. You
Yeah.
want to get them to meet and greet some people, to get into systems, to get, a familiarity with the job and have built some relationships and some rapport. And then you bring them in for some in-person time, because if you do the in-person time, say day one or week one, you don't get bang for your buck in that. So those are some of the things that we did.
Yeah. And I'm taking some notes because I think as we're thinking about hiring here at Boone, we're a completely remote team, and we have 15 to 20 people on our team. We have 200 coaches that are across the country that are all, they're 1099s, but they're all remote. And as we think about onboarding, that's been a huge topic of conversation for us, is like, how do we, first of all, give them the SOPs and all of the playbooks needed to make sure that they are set up for success in their job, but then also from a culture perspective, how do you make them feel connected? How do you make them feel engaged? And I think one of the things that we continue to see, and I think we've done a really good job with this, but people can get lost really easily. And it's a lot harder to really know how somebody is doing when they're virtual. Even if you're communicating with them on a consistent basis, it's like, well, how are you really doing? You could put on a face over Zoom, but when you're in person with that individual, you can really feel it in a different sort of way. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges is that we've seen, is to your point of, and I think that just ties back to engagement and connectivity. It's like, how do you break through that barrier? I think that's an area that's been really challenging for us.
Totally. And Alex, what comes to mind for me in that scenario where you're checking in to see how they're doing, and you don't know whether or not they're where they need to be. If they're in the office, what happens is they circle back an hour later and say, you know what, I have another question, and it just becomes natural, and it's organic, and it just happens, and it's just a little bit more forced if it's virtual. You can say, hey, Teams, hit me on Teams at any time. And I think some people are better at taking advantage of that than others, but the opportunities for kind of the informal interaction in person is really hard to replicate in the virtual environment, I believe.
Yeah. And this has all been great, Scott. And I think we're running low on time here. So I always love to end these episodes with just an opportunity for the listeners to walk away with some key takeaways that they can bring back into their day-to-day. So, for the people leaders and the business leaders out there, I guess if you're navigating the current landscape of hybrid, remote, back in office, what are your top 3 tips that they can walk away with to bring back into their workplace today?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I think most of this conversation has been about hybrid, and maybe that's the best of both worlds. And to me, I've always kind of tried to make sure that my bias of working in the office is kept in check. So first and foremost, don't lose sight of how remote work does provide flexibility that has real value to employees. There's give and take there. Avoid being tone deaf on the topic. You and I spoke, a week or so ago, and you were talking about, you got a toddler at home, you got a baby at home. So for you, going into the office even 3 days a week with the commute on the front end and the back end, that presents, challenges. And I think you need to be thinking about all of your staff and the unique needs and what they might be juggling as you think about your policies.
Yeah.
I think, for all teams, that there needs to be an opportunity where at least once a year you're getting them together. It can be expensive, but you're getting them together for some in-person time, some collaboration time. It's not all spent on business topics, but it's a way for people to get to know each other outside of, just the things you're working on. And I think that's important. I think it galvanizes teams and bolsters the team and organization culture. And then lastly, I would say empower your leaders. So I wanted to always provide guardrails. Here's what's important. It's employee engagement, it's culture, it's our collaboration. And, I think for people around the office, we want to have them in on a regular basis. but then allow your leaders and that are leading the individual teams, to run with that and accommodate team differences, individual differences. Certain teams, it's more important that they're in the office. We talked about our sales team, but maybe for other teams, it's less important. So I think that's another area to be thinking about. So those would be my three as I thought about this topic.
That's great. And as a remote business owner, I'm trying to apply as much of that into my day-to-day as I can. But that's super helpful. And I guess just last thing, Scott, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so I think my last name is notoriously hard to spell and pronounce, but easiest way would be you just go to LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, you look up SafeSend, no spaces, SafeSend Scott. You'll find me, or my email address is scott.fleszar@safesend.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, Scott, we will be in touch, sir. Appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon.
This was a pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
All right. Thanks.